Hello and welcome back to my VBA and Excel training channel. In this video, I'm going to show you an awesome trick that's going to combine a bunch of Excel files into a single file. It is cool, it's fun, it's very efficient, and it's going to be very useful for you in many projects and Excel spreadsheet work that you do. And by the end of the video, I promise you, you're going to be able to do this on your own because the code is actually easy, and I'm going to walk you through that and kind of tell you what that means. I have a fairly new channel, so if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and do that. By the end of the video, if you feel like you learned something, give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions or just comments, post them in the comments down below, and I'll try and respond when I can. In addition to that, check out some of my other videos for some cool VBA tricks. Okay, so what we have in front of us is essentially a template. We have some headers up top. We have some buttons that I've set up. If you don't know how to set up those buttons, check out one of my other videos that'll show you how to do that. And what we're going to do is grab a bunch of data from multiple files off of my hard drive and throw them onto this spreadsheet that we're looking at right now. So what I've done in advance is set up some dummy data that is on 5 different Excel files. We can go and open up one just to kind of give a quick look at it. And it's just got some dates, names, amounts or numbers in there. No big deal, we don't really care about that. But each of the 5 files have similar data, so what's best is to have the data in the same kind of format, same columns. You don't want the same data in different columns. It's just going to complicate things as you're moving data, at least in terms of how this code is set up. Certainly you can do that, but it's just going to get a little more complicated and more advanced than what we're going to tackle today. So first things first, we need to be able to open up all those files. Well, we're going to tap into VBA to be able to help us with that. And right now we're looking at VBA. To get there, you can hit Alt F11 on your keyboard, and we're going to be focusing on this code. So I've given it a name of Open All Workbooks. Here's the path, which is just essentially on my desktop. I've created a folder called Excel files, so it's easily identifiable. And as I've noted here in green with the apostrophe, green text is going to be text that is not executed, in case you're new to VBA. Those are more so just comments or notes for the programmer or future folks who are going to be looking at the code. Our path is set here. It's just path is just a variable. You can give it whatever name you want, but I'm calling it path just so it's easy to tell. File name is equal to, we're looking at the directory, and here we're identifying where in the directory we're looking at, or representative of this location. We're looking at .xls files. If you notice, these are all .xlsx files. That's okay. By default, it's going to go ahead and grab those, even though that we don't have an X right there. It's not really necessary. And it's set to VB normal. We'll just go ahead and leave it at that. And then here we're creating a do loop in this entire section here. So at that point we're looping until the file name is equal to blank. So in other words, until it gets to the last file and reaches that point. If here the next line is an if-then statement, basically saying, if the path is not equal to the current workbook, or whether it's the path here or the name, then it's going to set a variable, and it's going to open up that workbook that it identifies on the hard drive in this particular folder called Excel files. So here's the path, here's the file name, and it's going to open up that file. And down here, file name is equal to the directory. So that just, as I've notated here, sets the next file name to a variable. So it can continue to loop through each of the file names and not break. So that's pretty easy. So down here we have copy workbooks. Before we get to that, I'm going to pause for just a quick second and hop back over to Excel. Because I've broken this down into different levels just for visibility purposes and this training session, I have a button that is called an open button, and that specifically calls out this macro open all workbooks. So we can execute that. Click on that. It opens up all the Excel files. You can see there's all 5 of them as I toggle through each of them. I'm going to go ahead and close back out of those. So down here we have copy workbooks, and what we're going to do is essentially grab the data off of those workbooks and then throw it to our main template, which is found here. So in here it's going to set a y equal to 1. We're just setting a variable equal to 1, and that'll make more sense here as we get into it. Workbooks, and here's the name of the workbook that I have, which is the templates. I didn't mention earlier, but it's just called Open Many Workbooks.xlsm. So it's a macro enabled workbook. All it's doing here is just activating that workbook. So it's just kind of setting a baseline, and then from there it's going to do a for next, which is this entire code, and it's looking at each WB just representative of workbooks. You can use whatever you want really in workbooks. So it's going to look at each workbook within the workbooks that we just opened, and it's going to here in terms of criteria to meet, if the workbook name is not equal to the workbook that I've kind of initiated this action from, then it's going to activate said workbook, which could be, book 2, book 3, book 4, whatever. Okay, from that point, then we're setting a variable of x is equal to 2, and that's for our do loop right here. So if we're in book 2, for example, we're going to advance the row by x, and as x increases by 1, all we're looking for is to find really the last row within the data set and get to the blank row. So once we've established that kind of position, then we're going to select our range, which is from, in this case, from A2 over to X, which is the column, the actual column, and X is our variable. That may be a little bit confusing right there, but just know that X is the actual column. You could set it to J or K or whatever. We just happen to go out more columns than necessary on this particular example. And then X right there is the variable. So once that range is selected, then we will copy the range, and then workbooks, the template is then activated to in essence switch back to the place where we want to paste the data. And we have another do loop, which is from our y is equal to 1 up there. Now we're going to look at y as a row and advance one by one until we can find a blank row. So the reason for this particular do loop, now that we're back to the main template, is to find the last or empty row, because in the midst of the macro we may have already copied a couple files or 10 files or our first file. It doesn't really matter. We just need to be able to pass over any existing data, if applicable, to be able to get to the last blank row. Otherwise, if that's not in there, you're going to be copying and pasting over rows 1 through 10 each time potentially, and just overriding your data. So at that point it will paste, and that code is pretty straightforward, just doing a paste all. And then the next code, line of code we have is application.cut copy mode equal to false. That should probably be up top. You can put it up there, it's not really necessary. We can touch on that maybe in a different video or so, but workbooks.workbook.wb.name.close, so that's going to take the file that we copied data from, close it, and get rid of it because we're done with it. So at that point it's looking at the next workbook, and it's going to, as part of this for next statement, it's going to continue to go through each of those workbooks that have been opened, grab the data, paste it, and then close, and then repeat. So pretty easy. That's all the code that there is to it. And so what I'm going to do now is execute a little bit more code. So we already executed the open files. I did close out of them, so I'm going to kind of get us back to where those were open. And now that they're all open, I'm going to come back and click on the second button, which is copy data and close workbook. So that's the code we just got done looking at. So once I click on that, you can see it flashes rather quickly, and all of those 5 files have already had their data copied and pasted into our template here. You know, I'm just breaking it out by multiple steps for simplicity's sake and for this training session. Ultimately, we don't need those 2 buttons. We have a button here that combines all of the code that we've talked about. For a simpler version of that, if you will, I have the macro names, or those sub names, up here. So open all workbooks right here, copy workbooks right here. I just have those in a simpler sub of get data. So that is linked to this button. So once I click on that button, it's going to execute both macros, both codes, and just in one push of a button. So we'll watch that. And done. Literally just takes a couple of seconds. That's 5 files. We just copied, 38 rows or so. The header was already there. And that's really about all there is to it. It's an excellent tool and utility to be able to combine so many files into a single file. Maybe you're on the job and you're saving reports on a daily basis, and you have a month's worth of reports, couple months worth of reports, whatever. This thing can handle it. It'll take all those files, consolidate them into a single file. I mean, sure, the more files you have, it's not really going to run slower. It's just going to take longer. It'll still work. It won't break. I've tested that out, and it's really slick. Huge time saver. I mean, just with a click of a button, you can do all that. And as you can see with the code, not a lot has to be changed there. Really just the paths and maybe the file name. Just make sure that file name doesn't get changed, considering it's referenced in the code itself, because once you update that file name, you'll have to update the code to make sure that it's still referencing the same file. But the easiest thing to do is just to leave the file name as is. So I definitely appreciate you watching this video. Hopefully you learned something today. And don't hesitate to throw out some suggestions for some other videos that I could possibly make in the future. I'll definitely be working on some other projects and see if I can crank out some additional tips or tricks and just try and keep them, kind of at the same level, maybe for beginners, but still certainly applicable to other higher end users. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, subscribe, like, check out my other videos, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.